Hey everyone, and welcome to the Retro channel, and today we're doing some audio upgrades for the good old PS1. And no, this isn't a video about the audiophile SCPH-1000 with the RCAs on the back. What I'm talking about here is a digital audio upgrade for these machines. And that's made possible by this thing, which plugs into most PS1s that have the parallel port on the back, specifically the 1000, 5500 and 7000 series. Or if we're talking in board revisions, the PU7 all the way up to the PU20. Unfortunately, there's no hope for the slim PS1, and unfortunately most of the 7500 and 9000 series PS1s also miss out on this. But if you've got one of these earlier models with the parallel port and the right revision board inside, you can definitely apply this mod. Now, getting digital audio out of the PS1 is nothing new, although the previous way of doing it is a lot more complicated, involves soldering a lot of wires, and there's no real easy way to mount the optical output on the back of the machine. That's why I tried to come up with something a little bit simpler to install and also doesn't require any case modifications. Basically, what we're going to need to do is solder two wires inside the PS1, and then you simply plug this into the parallel port on the back, and it has a 3.5mm output that does both optical and coaxial. Now, why would you even want to get digital audio from the PS1? Well, despite what they say online, these are not the greatest machines in terms of audio output. Yes, Sony did use a fairly high quality DAC for the time, but any modern DAC will easily outperform the things found in these machines. And being a games console, there is a lot of electrical noise in these machines that can find their way into the audio output, not to mention the video signals that are usually carried alongside it. So rather than relying on the analog output from these machines, we can instead grab the digital audio before it gets converted into analog, send that over the 3.5mm connector via either optical or coax, and pipe that into an external DAC or AV receiver, or even some upscalers like the RetroTink 4K and the OSSC Pro, I believe also have an optical audio input. Now, like I said, this does also do coax out, and for that you just need a little 3.5mm adapter, and if it's a stereo audio cable like this one, the digital audio will be on the left channel. You can also get mono cables that'll just have a single RCA plug, kind of like that. I'm pretty sure I've got one of those around somewhere, but I couldn't find it, so doesn't really matter, just ignore the right channel if you're using a stereo cable. And likewise for the optical, you can either look for a 3.5mm to Toslink cable like this one here, or you can find these 3.5mm to the regular Toslink connector that just plugs straight into there, and then you can use your standard optical Toslink cables. So let's crack open these consoles, install a couple of wires, and then we'll do some comparisons between the digital audio output and the regular analog audio. So let's start off with the 7000 series, which has a PU20 board inside, and then we'll look at how to do the 5500 with the PU18 board, and the 1000 series with the PU8 board. First thing we need to do, of course, is remove the screws from the underside. Oh, and before I forget, if you're using the SIO, this mod is not going to be compatible. First of all, you're going to have the SIO plugged into your parallel port, so it's obviously not going to work anyway. And the SIO also takes over a couple of pins on the parallel port that we need for our digital audio mod. So if you're a SIO user, sorry, really, sorry. Get next station. Anyway, let's open this thing up, take a look inside. So here we are. Obviously we've got a mains power supply here, so make sure you do this with the machine unplugged. And before you touch anything, just give the power button a quick press, just to make sure that everything over here is discharged. Once you've done that, you can start unplugging all these connectors. So these two here, and the two going to the optical drive. Lift that up out of the way. And then we've got a few more screws to remove this top metal shield. Once you've got the screws out, we can take out this metal plate. So I usually just sort of lift it up at the back a little bit and sort of twist it around. Eventually, once you unroute it from all the wires, that should pop out of the way. And for the PU20, we just need to fold over this little copper shield, and we're going to focus our attention on this area of the board. So you may already notice I've marked the board in a couple of places, and all we're going to do is solder a wire from this point here up to this point here, and another wire from here over to here. This is going to take the required digital audio signals from this part of the board and bring them over to the parallel port on a couple of unused pins. It seems Sony left 2 pins on the parallel port unused, and that is exactly what we need to get our digital audio signal over to it. And it's a similar idea for the other board revisions. The only thing that differs is where we need to solder these wires to. But we'll take a look at these once we've finished off the PU20 board. First thing we want to do is just tin these pads that we need to solder to. So one of them's there, one there, and then over near the parallel port, there's one there, and one there. I'll put up high-res photos on the Tindy store, which is where you'll find these things. I'll also include some wire with them. So yeah, don't worry too much if it's not obvious in this video. There'll be pictures of the install process for each board on the Tindy store. So we're just going to solder one wire to this point. The solder's already going all globby, so a little bit of fresh flux. Just to make that look pretty, and it's nice and solid. Tiny drop of flux is a good idea. Right, that's one down, one to go. All right, and that is the mod complete. So yeah, a simple 2-wire install, easily reversible, and we don't have to do any modifications to the case. So let's button this back up. Before we test it out, we'll have a look at the install on the other 2 machines. I've already modded these 2, but we'll just take a quick look at how it's done. And I've just noticed that there's a little metal tab here that sits right where I've put that wire. So make sure you avoid running a wire across that little copper area there. There we go. Not as pretty as it was, but it'll do the job. All right, for the 5500 series, once again, remove all the screws and take off the top cover. Make sure the power supply isn't charged up, and remove the optical drive, or X station in this case, and the other cables as well. And remove all the screws holding this metal plate. I've already done that just to save some time. And on these PU18 boards, we're actually going to do the install from the underside. So you also need to remove the screws holding the main board in. Once again, already done that, so this should just lift out. Right, and here's the 2 wires that need to be installed. Again, I'll have high-res photos on the Tindy store, so refer to that if you're not sure. Yeah, even if you've got the X station board installed, thankfully it doesn't block the little solder pad that we need to solder to. And once again, try and avoid running wires over these exposed areas. And finally, the 1000 series. So remove screws. Take off the lid, make sure there's no power left in the power supply, remove the optical drive or X station, depending on what you've got in there. And once again, we need to remove the metal shield, but on these models, you also have to remove the controller ports. So find a screw, take it out. All right, that should be enough to free all of this stuff. There is like this copper tape thing here, but this one has lost all its stickiness, so it's just flapping around in the breeze. For this one, we also need to do this from the underside of the board, so we also need to take out a few more screws to free this board. 2 more screws? Is that it? Yes. So for the PU7 and PU8 boards, we need to look for these 2 points and run wires to these 2 points. Once again, of course, avoid these little areas. And in general, I try and stick to running the wires across the top of a solid ground plane. So when possible, I'll avoid putting the wires over the top of a bunch of traces. All right, all 3 of these machines are now set up to output digital audio, so all we need to do is plug the adapter into the parallel port. And that sits in there just like so. And then plug in either a optical or coax cable into the little output, and we're ready to go. So I'm going to hook this up to the RetroTink 5X via RGB SCART, but we'll actually be using the digital audio output to capture the audio side of things. So what I have here is a digital audio to USB receiver. So this will give us a direct digital capture, and plug that into the computer. And here we go. And everything appears to be working. I'm only hearing this through the crappy laptop speakers, so it doesn't really sound any different. But let's have a look at some direct captures from both the digital output, the analog RCAs that are found on the 1000 models, and also the SCART RGB analog audio output. So what we've got here are 3 different captures, the first one being the digital output, second one is the AV output using the RCA connectors on the back of the 1000 model, and the third one is from the multi-out using my SCART RGB cable. Basically I use the 1000 model because it's supposed to be the best in terms of audio, so I wanted to give this thing a fair fight. I also use an original Sony AV cable, so the original PlayStation one, and the SCART cable. All the audio and video signals are all individually shielded. Part of the reason I'm wearing a different shirt is because, yes, it is the next day. It took a little while to get the digital audio capture set up properly, but it's working now. So let's have a little comparison. Keep in mind that YouTube compression is obviously going to, affect things here possibly, so it may not sound any different to you, but I guess we're about to find out. So let's start off just with the digital capture. And switching over to the RCAs. And finally the multi-out. So whether or not you heard any difference between those samples, I guess is up to you. I can clearly hear it when it's hooked up to a proper amplifier. Like I said, the laptop speakers don't really do it any justice. But we can take a look at the spectrogram of all these waveforms, because that will actually reveal a little bit more of what's going on behind the scenes. Let's also just downmix these to mono just so they're a bit easier to see. Right, there we go. So if you've never looked at a spectrogram before, basically what we have is a visual representation of the frequencies on the vertical axis and obviously time going across the horizontal. And the areas where it looks sort of hotter, if you imagine this as like a thermal image, where there's more intensity in those frequencies. So they all look more or less the same, but you can see sort of around the start of the track, the top one, which is the digital capture, looks pretty empty in this void here, whereas the other two have this obvious line going through the middle, and especially on the RCA outputs, there's a lot of little speckly bits in the middle. So that's basically just high frequency noise that isn't part of the original music track. This line going through the middle stays at 15.5 kilohertz or thereabouts, and that is the video information getting mixed in with the analog audio signal. So that's always going to be a bit of a problem with analog audio and video. And depending on the cables and the device, you'll either get more or less video noise getting into the audio signal. So you can see the SCART version is actually slightly better than the RCA outputs. So if we zoom back out and take a look at the entire track, you can definitely see both of those analog versions have that obvious line at 15.5 kilohertz. Depending on what's on the screen will affect how intense that is. So if we take a look at the first few seconds of the track, you can see it's not quite as bad in the first 2 or 3 seconds, and then it gets considerably worse. And that is because at the start of this intro, the screen is pretty much black, so there's very little video noise happening. But once the actual title screen comes in, that's when you start to see a lot more noise getting into the audio signal. We can also see that at the end of the track, so here's where the screen is sort of brighter, and as the screen fades to black, that noise also fades with it, but it is still constantly there. If you want to hear what it sounds like, we can also amplify this a little bit. And it looks like Audacity has automatically picked 46 decibels, so that will bring it up to basically 0 dB. So that's like a pretty crappy vinyl record pressing, or maybe a fairly average cassette tape signal to noise ratio, so not the greatest in the world. You can see that I've applied it to all these tracks, and the digital one hasn't changed because there's absolutely no noise in there to amplify. So this is obviously going to sound pretty annoying because we've just amplified that noise, but this is what the RCA noise sounds like. And this is the multi-out. So yeah, definitely two different noise profiles there, but still noisy nonetheless. It's probably actually more obvious in the waveform view. So I think that's enough of staring at waveforms and listening to annoying noises. Yeah, I really like the digital audio output from the PS1. I think it sounds so much better, at least once you've got it hooked up to a decent amplifier and a decent pair of speakers. So if you're interested in this thing, it'll be available on my Tindy store. Links to that are in the video description. Like I said, it only works with the 1000 up to the 7000 series PlayStations, the PU7 to PU20 main boards. The PU22 and also anything beyond that, like the Slim PS1, it will not work with that. I have found a way to get digital audio from those models, but doing that actually disables the analog audio circuit. No idea why, I guess that's just the way Sony designed the later models. So yeah, I don't really recommend trying to get digital audio from the later model PS1s. Anyway, I think that is it for this one, so thank you all for watching. A huge thanks to the people that support the channel on Patreon. If you want to do the same, you'll find links to that in the video description as well. And yeah, you'll get ad-free early access to all videos, along with discounts on the Tindy store, which is where you find these things. So yeah, thank you to all my patrons. Your support really does mean a whole lot, and I wouldn't be able to do these kind of things without you guys. So yeah, thank you all for watching, liking, subscribing, all that YouTube bullshit. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.